Yeah, the recording has started, and let us move ahead. The other day we were speaking about the factors affecting distribution of population, and I would like to move ahead from that. Basically, divided into various factors, but on a broad scale, we could say that you have physical and you have human factors as such. In the physical factors, we have accessibility, we have topography. Okay, water we said is a very important aspect, but then too much of water is also, or too less of water is a difficulty. So climate wise, I said the other day that human life tends to avoid, in fact majority of life I would rather tell you, will tend to avoid extremities as such, and you will have very unique animals in and of course plants as well, where you tend to have extremities of climatic conditions, in the sense, say for example, you have cacti in the deserts, and animals like scorpions and snakes in the deserts are the most poisonous, basically because availability of food is already less, and as a consequence they do not want to miss on any of such chances as such. So then you'll see that you go to polar areas, and the bears there have this habit of uh, this winter sleep called as hibernation. And then you have animals in hot areas wherein they go to they go through what a summer sleep, what is called as an aestivation. I don't know how many of you all do recollect this. Hibernation is known to many of us, but then aestivation, which is a summer sleep, is not known to many of us. So on the other hand, you'll see that the very fact that uh, the equatorial region has a huge biodiversity, except for human population. And that's why you don't find humans in the equatorial forests as such. The very fact that natural conditions like food, water, humidity is all available uh, all around you, and as a consequence, the equatorial forests have a huge diversity, followed by the monsoons. Rocks and minerals, natural vegetation, and animal life. As I said to you all the other day, that all of this could be blended into each other. It is for academic purpose that we separate them out as individual physical features. And then we speak about economic factors. Economic basically meaning all the human-based factors as such. However, one point that we should not be missing is what I said the other day is migration, and though this it's not a exclusive part of your syllabus as such, keep in mind that migration. That's why I posted you a small uh, note, advanced note, I would say, as far as migration is concerned. Nowadays, migration is playing a major role as far as distribution of population is concerned, particularly the so-called developed countries like the US and Canada. And we saw that in this map. Sorry, where is that map? Yeah, we saw that in this map that very few countries of the world actually are keeping pace or with the shape, the ratio between the shape and the rather the area and the population as such. Okay, as we all know, and it should be, China and India are hugely distorted. So do Pakistan and Bangladesh. Nepal is fairly, I would say, towards a larger population, but then it's fair enough. Japan, you'll see that you can still see the shape of Japan here. Okay, we've spoken about China, India. As far as Russia is concerned, okay, you'll see that area is large, population is less. Same is the case with Canada. Area is large, population is less. You'll see that US, Mexico, Brazil to quite an extent, And because the resolution of this particular map was not fine, I'm compensated to keep it down. Let me try to enlarge it and let us try to see. No, it does not give us a better picture. Uh, Interestingly enough, the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, as it is called, you'll see that that's a bit separated out from here. And South Africa, I would say, is again maintaining its shape. Madagascar, most of Western Europe is maintaining its shape. That's another interesting thing to note. And however, the other day we spoke about Australia and New Zealand. It's But then we are going to speak about a few more things. Indonesia seems bloated up as compared to its actual size. Sri Lanka also is large in comparison. So, economic factors make a major role in distribution of population as such. In fact, the world tends to be divided into, ever since I would say, say colonization. We have been fascinated with comparing ourselves in economic aspects as such. Uh, the world tends to be divided into developed, underdeveloped, and developing countries, and the parameters of dividing this is dependent on economic factors, the per capita consumption of this and that. And it started with iron and steel and shifted to electricity and so on and so forth. So, uh, when it comes to distribution of population in the traditional world, I would say that traditional in the sense I would say it's also called as the old world, Asia and Africa as such. Uh, because I would say um, human resource is looked upon as a physical resource, particularly working in agricultural fields, etc. Larger the number of hands working, better. So you'll see that for a considerable part of this history of these places, uh, the fertility rate, or I would say the number of children per family, have always been large as such. And on the other hand, if you remember, we spoke about it the other day that in Germany, for example, you'll see that the cost of living and maintaining the standards are so high that say, couples in developed countries actually tend to be avoiding having children. And in fact, I'm told that in Germany, particularly, there is a child raising allowance, and the last time I heard about it, it was around 800 to 900 Deutschmarks. And I would say that the value of each Deutschmark in Indian rupees is anywhere around 80 rupees, I suppose, minimum. Okay, I could be a bit plus or minus 10, but 80 rupees if we take, okay, you'll see that it comes to 64,000 rupees. 8,000 DM per DM is 8 rupees, sorry, 80 rupees. It comes to 64,000 rupees. The government is investing in asking people to actually raise children, and it's paying 64,000 rupees, I would say, to their people so that they raise children uh, as such. So that's a very funny thing to happen as far as a same planet is concerned. One part of the world, say for example, India and China, are grappling with issues of growing population. So are countries like Indonesia and Nigeria in Africa, for example. On the other hand, you have countries like Japan, you have countries like Germany, who are actually raising population. And I think I read an article on, I think it's Australia or New Zealand. They have tweaked their migration policies again because even they are in the fifth stage of demographic transition, wherein the birth rates are low. I'm not saying that couples are not having children there, but the birth rates are low, and as a reason, it tends to be a requirement to have a larger human resource as such. So that's one thing. Then you come to social aspects as such. The other day I did speak about the fact that socially also, uh, religions and sub-religions and uh, sects, sects, ask you to follow certain norms and rules as far as male and female populations are concerned, and people tend to follow such rules because they believe in that particular aspect as such. Demographic factors, as I say, I would say that demographic factors would primarily include natural increase. That's to do with the birth rate as such. And you'll see that birth rates around the globe are so very different. And I would say that women in Europe, in the Northern America, have to have the are seen to have the least of the fertility rates, while women in Africa are seen to have the maximum fertility rates. On the other hand, women in Asia, etc., are now moderating into fertility. What's a fertility rate? It's basically the number of children that one female can bear in her fertile uh, period of life. In the sense, uh, the other day we were speaking about puberty. It's after puberty that a female can possibly give birth to a child, and so on and so forth. This also is has a natural variation, I would say. As you move towards the equator, the age of puberty is comes much early, and of course, it stops early as well. On the other hand, if you go to the colder parts of the world, puberty comes in a bit late, and of course, it goes away also, yeah, biologically. Goes away in the sense biologically at a bit later age also. Then I said that migration, employment opportunities. Yes. Uh, Before I come to migration, I forgot about employment opportunities. You'll see that from region to region, you'll see that rural areas have lesser amount of employment opportunities. So, movement towards rural areas is low, and this is a common feature throughout the globe. On the other hand, you'll see that urban areas do require a lot of workforce, and thus there is a lot of employment available on various forms as far as urban areas are concerned. And thus, you will see that there's a lot of migration towards the urban areas. And it was basically this migration which actually, and the pathetic sense of it, yes, yes, I know. I'll try to connect again. Yeah, yeah, I'm back. Okay, people, you are now able to hear me again? Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go back to my presentation. I will, okay. So, that's another aspect when we speak about factors affecting distribution of population as such, and then you'll have say major destinations in the world which have been very heavily attracting populations from different parts of the world as such. Say the developed countries and the markets in the developed countries and so on and so forth. Then I would say uh, migrations in the form of employment was one we were speaking about. Migrations in the form of, so to say, transhumance. I spoke about it the other day that this part of, sorry, not this part, this would be China. So this part of the world, Tajikistan and Turkmenistan and uh, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. Okay, you'll see that because Central Asia is very, very cold as such, people keep on moving into and out of it basically because during the summers, the so-called cold areas of Central Asia provide with very rich food for their cattle, and as a consequence, you will see that they move into and out of it. This is just one example. This happens in many parts of the world on a micro scale. This is the most macro scale that it happens on. So this is called as transhumance, and this is basically a seasonal type of uh, migration as such. Then you have something which is called as commuting migrations. Commuting in the sense you have people traveling for work purpose, and this is seen to be happening nowadays between urban areas and suburban urban areas as such, particularly in Mumbai and the areas around Mumbai, say around 100 kilometers away from places like the business areas like Churchgate and um, Churchgate areas of Nariman Point and the DN Road areas of Mumbai, which is the extreme south of Mumbai. People keep traveling. Now, let me tell you that 100 kilometers of travel is not an easy travel for the Mumbaikars, but then they travel, and I'm told that they travel beyond that also. In fact, you have people who go to Mumbai every day from Pune also. I have been a part of that for 15 years, 1995 to 2009. So this time there is this migration, but this is called as commuting migration. Okay, you'll see that for most part of the day, you are away from your house and then for work purposes, and then you come back. So that's it. And then you have a social migration in the sense that you get married away and then you move to your husband's place. That's one of the most, as I keep on saying, that's one of the most neglected form of migration that needs to be looked into. Then you can say you have migration for the purpose of education. Many of you all are living in different parts of Maharashtra, but you have got yourselves admitted into SP College, and had this been an offline class, we would have been in a classroom and you would have been living with some of your relatives in Pune, or some paying guest or some hostel somewhere, the college or otherwise. So that also is a temporary migration, I would say, not permanently moved into a new area, but then you're continuously away from your home as such, and that's an aspect of migration as well. So there are many dimensions to migration, and migration is getting very, very dynamic these days. Okay, and means of transportation is making it very, very fast from one part of the world to the other part, and so on and so forth. Then another aspect, uh, in fact, I would say that this is one of the major aspects nowadays. It has been a major aspect in history in the negative sense, and of course, it's now another aspect in the positive sense, and its government policies and programs is the factor, a major factor having affecting the distribution of population as such. You'll see that if we speak about the period of the Second World War, the Germans and the Jews, and we all know and we've read those novels on how the Germans prosecuted the Jews and so on and so forth. And then you have the Russians. Okay, you'll see that as far as the Russians were concerned, for a considerable period in time in history, and even today, the eastern part of Russia, which is called as Siberia, does not have so much of penetration of human population. We're going to speak about that when we speak about the distribution and so on. But as a matter of fact, you'll see that the world's longest railway starts from the eastern corner of Russia and goes all the way to the western corner of Russia, and Trans-Siberian Railway, as it is called. And who built this railway as such? You'll see that prisoners in western part of Russia were forced into work as far as Siberia is concerned. It's not only construction. Once they knew that, and of course, it's not a joke to come up with a railway in such a cold area with so much amount of snow. Okay, obviously there must have been an economic reason. Yes, the economic reason being that there are oil reserves and other reserves. So mining was another requirement, and mining requires human population. So that's another reason why the Russian governments forced prisoners and other outlaws into these areas as such. Nowadays, of course, they gave incentives, special incentives towards the eastern parts, special incentives towards the northern parts as such. By the way, you'll see that if you remember these places that we were locating as far as the duration of day and night on the weather and radar app is concerned, Novi Urengoy, which we looked for several months to be in solar night, is already into solar day, and many places that we have seen towards the northern parts in the northern hemisphere are into the solar day. That's 24-hour day as such. And today is the 12th. Another 10 days, the sun will be reaching the northernmost limit that it travels into the northern hemisphere as such. So those who have forgotten about the weather and radar app but would be interested can surely visit it, put the names of different cities towards the north and towards the south. I would suggest you could put Sydney, you could put Brisbane, you could put Melbourne, you could put Cape Town also. Cape Town would have a lesser number of day hours and a longer number of night hours as such. Similarly, you could look for places in Southern America, put there and just check the duration of day and night as such. By the way, the St. Halley station, which is there in the Antarctic continent, is in a polar night condition. Then, coming back to government policies, again, you'll see that the Indian government did not actually look into the growing population, I would say. I'm going to speak about the population policies of India. That's going to be at a later time when I speak about the growth of Indian population. But just to say that we initially, I would say that we were either not very serious about the growing population that was happening around us around the 1950s, or possibly it had religious angles to it. So just like the British did after 1857, possibly the governments then also did not want to interfere into such aspects. You'll see that as far as India is concerned, you'll see that sex, speaking about sex, is a taboo in India. And it's not actually indulging in actual sex as such. It's the hygiene around sex, sexual organs as such.
you see that we don't speak about it so very openly as such. Okay, it's considered to be a taboo, and somebody starts speaking about it is frowned upon by the elderlies, and you ask questions about why is this happening, why is hair growing around my private parts, etc. You'll see that they'll just tell you that it happens. You don't have. They'll not give you the biological reason. Possibly they don't know it, but in most of the cases, it so happens that they don't want to speak about it publicly. Having said this, okay, having said this, you'll see that India still remains to be the second most populous country in the world. So, what's the issue about sex? And you'll see that everybody is involved in sex, and because everybody is involved in sex, you have such a huge population, the second largest country in the world, and still you don't speak about sex. What nonsense is this? Okay, so that's very funny part of the Indian population of it. You'll see, you go into the heritage and culture of India, you'll see that it's possibly the only country which has a temple dedicated to sex, and the Khajuraho as such. So we have been open societies, possibly the age of colonization and other aspects as such. I presume it could be the impact of the Mughal dynasty, and later on, you'll see that even today, you don't have to go all the way to the Khajuraho temples to look at this. You'll see that we've been very open as far as clothing, etc. are concerned. You go to southern India, you go to these temples, and you'll see that these carvings, you'll see that the style of cloth that they wear. Okay, you'll see that it's so very open type of clothing that these people used to wear. It's obviously, we can say it's used to wear, basically because it was only because people were wearing that it tended to be depicted on in carvings around as such. So I personally believe that it's so very nonsense to not speak about sex and sex education. Okay, eventually you'll see that it's in the last couple of decades that sex education tends to come up, and it's just that 1 week wherein people from different NGOs come in schools in eighth or ninth, and then they and the funny part of it again is that the girls will be sitting separately and they will be told separately. Why do we do this? Boys will be sitting separately and they will be told about the functioning of their private part. Why can't we sit together? Unless and until we sit together, you will see that if it happens to be an only boys class, and the next classroom happens to be an only girls classroom, I would say that the girls and the boys would not be concentrating in their own classroom. They would just be imagining what is happening in the next classroom as such. A funny thing, but then it's a serious error that we are causing as such. Okay, you'll see that of course it's a very unhygienic habit that people throw away condoms off the road, just like they are doing so with their masks, etc. Nowadays as such. But then you'll see that some third person tends to see, a group of college going kids tends to see a condom fallen somewhere, and they just laugh at it and so on and so forth. It's a contraceptive. It's basically avoiding a new say life coming on the planet. Now, whether that life would have been a resource or not is a different thing. We should look at it as we should look at sex as a biological process. In fact, if you remember the criticisms about Malthus, one of the criticisms was this that he combined sex and bearing a child together as such. Okay, there has been some weird thought about sex, and it's so very similar in the Western world also. Okay, we see all these pictures from the Western world, but I would say 50% of the society there also thinks in this particular way. Nobody is speaking about sex. I don't say that every now and then, every morning, every afternoon, every evening, you sit together and keep speaking about sex and that. Then you frown upon all these things, and in spite of that, you'll see that the fact is that one of the major trades that takes place on internet is all about pornography. Okay, so The trade of this runs into billions and billions of dollars. Okay. Now, because this is happening in international market, it is bound to happen in Indian conditions also. But that the government should be looking at it in a different way is a very important thing that I would say, particularly in Indian circumstances. There is no use saying that we are a very sacred country and this and that, and you rank second largest country in the world. The whole world knows that you are involved in sex, and that's why your population is 136 billion. 1.36 billion as such. Okay, it's a known fact. So let us not hide things about it. Let us be educated about it, and let us control our population at the best. Yes, we are controlling it, but there are difficulties as such. So this is how governments are tending to say affect distribution of population as such. I was speaking about China, and you see that China and India traditionally, the mindsets of the Chinese and Indians is not very different. They also are very clandestine about their activities as such. Clandestine meaning secretive about their activities as such. But then I would say they are a step ahead of India. They are a few more in number as compared to India is concerned, and only because of their policy in 83. Otherwise, they would have been approaching 2 billion by now. So that's another aspect about it. So these are the factors affecting distribution of population in the worldwide as such. And thus we need to now look into how does the population, just a moment. Yeah, distribution of population in the world. Now, normally, because the scale of the world is so huge, and you are placing near to 8 billion of population on this world map, it would be difficult for the person to understand the map. And that's why what is normally done is that they divide the world population into high populated areas, moderately populated areas, and low populated areas as such. And the same thing is done here. We could very well combine low populated areas and very low populated areas. And I'm going to speak about a few more things about certain areas, particularly very high population regions. Okay, it's areas. When we speak about areas, we normally, okay, now if you are to report population, you're going to report population of India, isn't it? So it is a more of a choropleth method. Okay, yes, on this map you can see that the distribution of population is shown in an isopleth method of representation, but using administrative boundaries, normally you'll see that maps are seen using choropleth methods as. Now, this being an isopleth method, I would say that to start with highly populated areas as such, highly populated areas, I would divide them into two major sections: the highly populated regions of the old world and the highly populated regions of the new world as such. When I'm speaking about the old world, I'm speaking about this part, okay, country, India. I'm speaking about China as such. And when we speak about regions, I'm going to come back to that as well. Okay, these are two major areas of the old world. Now, there have been pockets of very high densities of population, but I'll come to that later. As far as the new world is concerned, you'll see that this eastern border of US and is a very high densely populated region of the world as such. And then you have the Western Europe, which is a highly densely populated region of the world. Now you'll see that when it comes to moderation of population distribution, normally you'll see that invariably you'll see that from high to moderate and moderate to low and very low as such. You'll see that you'll not have abrupt pockets of very low and very high population in on the world map to be seen as such. So normally, if you study one of these extremes, okay, very highly populated regions is the best way to go. So once you know this, and somebody asks you, okay, let me give me the moderately populated regions of the world, all you have to do is to check on the peripheral areas as such. So you'll see that moderate population could be seen here, okay, Eastern Europe as such. Okay, you'll see that because you have the Himalayas between us and the Chinese, moderate population is a occurrence between India and China as such. And then you'll see that for moderate population, one would have to go all the way into South America. That's say from the central parts of US, I would rather say, all the way to the northern parts of Amazon, and of course the developed part of Brazil is another region wherein you have a moderate density of population as such. So you'll see that having identified moderate density, you'll see that the western border of Australia is another area. I think I've covered majority of them, and you'll see that now if we move, if we keep away the circles that we have drawn around moderate, you'll see that you have one here also, sorry, and one here. The rest of the world is still low populated, and if you connect with geography, okay, identifying areas with low population is not a big difference, basically because the other day I said that populations avoid extremities as such. If we start from the extreme north and extremely low concentration of population, you'll see that you have Greenland here, and you have northern Canada here, and you have Siberia, northern parts of Russia that we were referring to a whole stretch of it, right from northern parts of Norway and Sweden all the way to the eastern border of Russia. So that's basically what geography do you find behind this. You'll see that it's basically because of very cold climatic conditions that you're not going to have populations in these areas as such. The other extreme, you'll see that the Sahara, the other extreme, the Kalahari, okay, the Arabian desert, the West Australian desert, okay, and is the other extreme. What is the next extreme? Too much of rainfall, and of course, man has penetrated many areas of heavy rainfall as such. But as of today, even so, you'll see that this part, Brazil, and the Amazonian forests as such. Okay, you'll see that majority of Brazil and Amazonian forest lie under either low populated or very low populated as all the way down into Argentina as well as such. You'll see that there are only two pockets, the northern pocket and the southeastern pocket, I would say, which have moderate population, leave aside high population areas. Then, yes, we can speak about say continental locations. You'll see that this is low population area, and that's basically because of very cold winters, and the summers also not being very uh, appreciable, basically because of a continental location. The amount of rain here is less. And if I don't know whether I've spoken about this to you all, but I think we spoke about this when we speak about climate as such, that uh, rain controls temperatures to quite an extent. You see that areas having appreciable amount of rain will not allow temperatures to escape into extremes as such, very high, very low as such. And without rain, it becomes so very logical, so very evident, and um, that these areas could have extremities of climate as such. Central parts of Africa again have a very low temperature. Sorry, no, sorry, not low temperature as such, but a low populated area, classify under low populated areas, because I would say I would classify them along with the Amazon forest. The Congo forests here are with, and of course the Congo River and the other rivers here as such. And then it fades away into the savanna grasslands as such. So either ways, forests of different types have always kept human beings in these areas at bay. And you have different tribes and clans in different parts, many of them still practicing hunting and gathering as major activity. Agriculture is very, very less on the continent of Africa. Let me tell you, though, that the potential for agriculture is very high on this aspect. While we could distribute it further in the sense, you see that the Appalachian Mountains and the border between Canada and the eastern border of USA. Okay, the phasing out, as I said, okay, from very dense to moderate and then low and then very low as such. Okay, the hills of the mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, keeps the population in say the northern parts of the United States and the southern parts of Canada very, very uh, uh, low populated or low populous, as I said. But let me remind you again that this is on a very, very, very macro scale population dynamics. Given this, given the area that we have, and given the number of population that we have, which is fast approaching 8 billion as such, there could be a few variations and twitches and twigs here and there, and I would like to highlight on those particularly because this is something that everybody would be knowing. uh, we need to be understanding the minor dynamics as far as high density population areas particularly are concerned as such. Okay, and with regards that, you see that Japan is something that I would like to start with, the easternmost of the uh, yeah. Uh, Japan is one country in Asia which has a very high density of population. That's one thing. Normally, how do you remember it? I'll give you a knack to remember it. The population of Japan and Maharashtra are more or less the same. The other characteristics also of Japan and Maharashtra's population, I'm not saying that any other parameters as such, are also the same as such. So you could say that the Japanese population is uh, so very similar to that of Maharashtra as such. What is true about Japan is seen nowhere in Asia, is seen nowhere in the northern hemisphere, but is seen in countries of South America, including Mexico, is seen in countries like Australia. Australia again is a very unique condition as such. Now, what is so unique about these South hemispheric countries, particularly of the New World, I would rather say, Africa doesn't fall under that particular category, and not much of Africa goes beyond deep into the Southern Hemisphere, I would rather say. I would say only 25 to 30% of us, Africa is into the southern hemisphere. 70% of it is still in the northern hemisphere. Now remember, when the New World was discovered, I'm not including US, Northern American continent in that, by the way. Okay, you'll see that the Europeans brought in technology, the Europeans brought in human resources, the Europeans brought in their own crops here, and they cultivated these crops and they carried away the produce into the European markets. This went on for students of history will know this. This went on for a couple and more centuries as such. So this trend established, and as a consequence, you'll see that the most prosperous of the cities, obviously going by the economic geography model, the most prosperous of the cities obviously would be along the margins of these continents. Okay, Buenos Aires or Rio de Janeiro. All these cities came up on the boundary margins of these continents as such. It's only recently that Brazil has uh, adopted a new capital, and that's towards the interior parts of it. Search for Brasilia, and that's the new capital, I would say. And in fact, you'll see that the same thing carries on in Australia as well. And the fact that I would say Perth, Brisbane, uh, Melbourne, Sydney, and one more city I'm forgetting. All of these have coastal location because export was a major thing as such, and that's why you'll see that in the southern hemispheric continents and countries as such, major cities need to have and seem to have a portal location. Okay, that's the reason behind these having. And I think I told about this earlier that speaking about Australia, the fact is that 90%, and now the numbers are further increasing. People say it's 95%, but I would be conservative. I would say 90% of Australia lives in 6 cities of Australia, and the sixth being Canberra, which is their official capital as well. So that's very unique for a country. And you see that had this been a choropleth map, had this been a choropleth map, Australia would have qualified under low populated regions as such. But now, since this is isopleth, you'll see that the southern parts are having high densities of population as also as such. Similarly, coming to the South American continent, you'll see that the Atlantic coast of Brazil has a significantly high population, and as you go interior into the Amazonian forests as such, the populations decrease drastically as as far as the North American continent is concerned, you'll see that the stretch from where the 13 colonies started, okay, all the way down now to Florida. Okay, Florida came into prominence with the former president of the U.S., Donald Trump. Okay, Florida is a place where the richest of the rich live in the US as such. And then you have along the borders all those. In fact, you'll see that if you were to ask me, so what's the geography behind this? I would say the Appalachian Mountains. Okay, they divide the high density population with regards to the moderate density population towards the interior as such. And another characteristic of this is that while individual cities started developing, they've started developing and they've grown in populations that nowadays from metropolis to megalopolis, and now they are called as conurbations, CONURBATIONS. You can search for the meanings and the list of cities which qualify under this in on Google as such. All these concepts are coming from the US, as one city is growing into the other, and you hardly have marking. Okay, otherwise there is a distinct mark when you travel from one city to the other. Say, for example, you are traveling from Pune to Ahmednagar or Pune to Solapur. You'll have a patch of distinctly low population in between, so that you know that you are out of Pune and you are into uh, uh, there is going to be some time before you enter Nagar, or you're going to be entering Solapur as such. Of course, as far as Nagar is concerned, I remember, I don't know how many of you all follow the landscape of Pune as such, but it was in 1980s that we used to live around Wagholi. That's on Nagar Road as such, and I believe me, it was barren, and those who come from that part and know Chandan Nagar was supposed to be the last uh, populated, or I would say moderately or high densely populated region Then you had to wait all the way till Wagholi, and the whole stretch in between was without any population as such. And now you go, it's full of activity and buzz. And in fact, you'll see that new housing projects seem to be continuously coming up, and Shikrapur, which was supposed to be a distinct place 25 kilometers from Pune, is nearly reaching hand out as far as from Pune is concerned. So the gap, what I mean to say is that the gap between Nagar and Pune, Ahmednagar and Pune, is filling up significantly fast, I would say. On the other hand, a similar thing used to happen between Pune and Pimpri-Chinchwad 20 years ago. It still seems to exist to some extent, but for a layman, for a new person, it becomes difficult to differentiate. You start from Pune, you suddenly enter the Khadki Cantonment Board, and then suddenly again you are into the Pimpri-Chinchwad Corporation as such. So over the period of time, cities tend to, population-wise particularly, they have their administrative limits as such, but they tend to fade away as far as population continuity is concerned. That's another important thing that we have to understand as far as population distribution is concerned as such. Then I would say South Africa is another location wherein towards the deep South Africa, you have high density. Amongst the old world, I missed on one place, and that's the delta of the Nile River. Is one of the most densely populated regions in the world again, and one tends to miss out on this particular thing normally if you are not going into further details of distribution of dense population on the planet as such. So Indonesia, again, we have seen that in the map also, has high densities of population. That's what I just think about anything that I am missing on that I need to pass on to you as far as distribution of population on the globes are concerned. These specific regions of very high density, that's the Nile Delta, the southeastern parts of Australia, the Atlantic part, the southern Atlantic part, I would rather say, for the South American continent, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, you'll see that if you take the area and if you generalize the distribution of population on the surface, you could, I wouldn't say you would get a distorted picture as such, but it would not help you in the absolute understanding of distribution of population as such. And that's why I purposely picked up an isoplete map of population rather than a choroplete map of population distribution as such. Yes, we have to come to the distribution of population in India. Again, I could not fetch a good map. I will try to do that before we meet next time. I would just like to also announce that a few students have already submitted their assignments, and I think the last day we have marked is 20th of June, I suppose. See that you start working around your assignments and finish them off as early as possible. You'll see that anything that is left for long does not turn up to be that fine as such. Anyway, I'll stop sharing the presentation first. I'll end the show, and let's return back to our meeting. And yeah, so if you have any questions for me for the day, you could ask me these questions regarding the population distribution. It's only next time that we would be in a position to go into the details of Indian population as such. If you have questions, you can ask me. Otherwise, we could call off this meeting. There's quite a few number of students. I don't know why. Anyway, I will be posting the recording, so those who were not there would not miss out on much as such. So if you have questions, we could go ahead. Otherwise, I'll first stop the recording as well.